Honourable Minister A.P. Letlape of Stellenbosch University writes that the main causes of our porous land borders are lack of resources, the length and material condition of the border, uncoordinated intelligence, corrupt government officials, the colonial border legacy, liberalist migration policies and laws. Honourable Minister, how do you respond to Letlape's causes of our porous borders?
Well, we need more border guards. South Africa has a severe shortage of border guards. The BMA has a total staff complement currently of about 2,700, but it needs around 11,000 personnel as per the approved structure. Firstly, of course, if we can get technology and we can detect people that are moving across the borderline, even though the BMA and Home Affairs is not responsible for building the actual border fence, we'll be able to detect people who are moving and we can catch them before they come into the country. And that's always financially.
I now take question number 390, which has been asked by the Honourable Chabane to the Minister of Home Affairs. The question is about the measures that will be implemented to strengthen the Border Management Authority, particularly regarding budget allocation adjustments. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Indeed, as I mentioned during the statements part, the management and control of our borders is absolutely essential, both for national security and for economic development. But the ability of the BMA to execute on this important task largely depends on the financial and human resources allocated to the organization. It is indeed an open secret that the BMA is underfunded. The implication of this underfunding is felt by both the operational arm of the institution as well as in administration. With regard to the impact that the underfunding has on human resource capacity, it results in a staff shortage. The BMA has a total staff complement currently of about 2,700, but it needs around 11,000 personnel as per the approved structure. The BMA does not have adequate personnel right now to do port and field law enforcement, and this affects the ability of the institution to deter and detect transgressions. The impact of underfunding on infrastructure can also be observed at some of our ports by things like the absence of inspection facilities, the unavailability of security cameras in some cases along the borderline, and the corridor towards the border post makes it difficult to manage the port environment effectively and efficiently. Therefore, the BMA does require additional tools of trade, such as drones, boats, for maritime border guards in order to discharge its mandate as expected. I do note that a lot of this technology has been procured through the CARA funding, but it is still on the way. The BMA has further inherited inadequate and obsolete movement control systems. The inefficiencies brought about by these systems does leave the BMA vulnerable by limiting its ability to detect illegal movement of persons and goods. While we acknowledge this constrained environment, the important point to make is that the BMA is actively engaging with National Treasury as well as myself so that this underfunding issue is addressed. To date, the BMA has prepared and presented 3 business cases to the National Treasury to reflect its financial requirements in terms of everything I've mentioned: human resources, tools of trade, and ICT. These meetings continue to be held between the BMA management and National Treasury to ensure that the institution is prioritized during budget allocations. It's a good deal for South Africa, Deputy Speaker, because an investment in the BMA prevents various issues, helps secure our national security, and facilitates the trade we require to grow our economy. Thank you.
The first supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Chabane.
I will take the supplementary question. From the Minister's response, it is evident that the BMA is seriously impacted by the underfunding. The hope is that the engagements with the National Treasury will yield positive outcomes in terms of the resourcing of the BMA. Given the fiscal constraints we face as a country, it means that prioritization of programs becomes very important. Now, Minister, what are the immediate programs that the Minister will consider as priorities for budget allocations for the BMA in the negotiations with the National Treasury in the face of the fiscal constraints that you have outlined?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much to the Honourable Member for the follow-up question. I agree fully with her statement, and it is important that we all carry the message around the importance of funding the BMA. In terms of her question, Without doubt, a critical priority is technology, because in an environment where an organization is understaffed, technology provides a force multiplier. Think about the ability of a single drone to detect movements across the border and how much that makes up for personnel shortages, for example. So I think investing in technology for the BMA is a critical priority, and that goes with its stated intent of setting up a national targeting center. Now, Deputy Speaker, this is a really important point, because at all of these institutions, whether it's Home Affairs or the BMA, it's not only about having technology, it's about making sure that the technological systems are integrated. For example, if you have a drone and it picks up irregular movements across the border, that information must be fed somewhere. It must be analyzed, and it must be linked to what you may be seeing on body cameras or what you may be seeing through your officials on the ground. That's what the National Targeting Center aims to do. It is an ability for us to analyze information in real time as it comes in from the port environment. If you link that with biometric access control at our ports, you will have the ingredients required for a really powerful multiplication of the BMA's force, even as we continue to work and motivate for higher personnel budgets. So I think without a doubt, digital transformation and investment in technology is the most critical and immediate impactful change we can make at the BMA, and that is a central part of the motivation that we have taken to National Treasury and that we continue to make on all platforms, because we can improve the situation at our borders. We live in the year 2024. There are amazing technological solutions out there, but we do require the resources, the willingness, and the innovative approach to make use of those. Thank you.
The second supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable van Staden.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Minister, the legislated mandate of a border management authority is to facilitate and manage the legitimate movement of persons within the border law enforcement area and ports of entry, the legitimate movement of goods, and to cooperate and to coordinate its border law enforcement functions with the SAPS, SARS, and the SADNF, border communities, and any other persons. Can the Minister indicate to this House if the Border Management Authority is currently in a position to successfully combat the smuggling of drugs, illicit cigarettes, human trafficking, and other illegal products, given their budget constraints? If not, why not? And if so, what measures will this department put in place to ensure that the BMA will receive an adequate budget to successfully perform the legislated mandate? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and to the Honourable Member. Well, firstly, the measures that you refer to are contained in the business case that we've submitted to National Treasury. So we're hoping to win the argument that, because Treasury thinks in numbers, of course, and I note that it's the Deputy Finance Minister sitting next to me, we have to actually motivate in terms of the numbers. But we have a very strong case when it comes to the BMA, because if you secure our trade environment, and at the same time speed up the amount of time that a truck or a person who's seeking to trade spends at the border, you'll actually enhance efficiency, you'll grow the economy, and of course that will lead to more tax income. So that's why we're saying through these business cases that it's a good deal for South Africa to invest in the BMA. But we also aren't stopping there. So I go back to the question of collaboration. Because in the meantime, while we're motivating and trying to get the resources, we can't just sit back and say we can't fix this environment. And to be clear, to answer your question, we have a very long way to go. I think every South African knows that. But what we're doing in the meantime is collaborating. So when it comes to the South African Revenue Service that has been mentioned a couple of times, they operate in the same environment. And so you can leverage off of technology and existing processes at the ports. And that's why the signing of that agreement and that cooperation between the BMA and SARS is so important. And that work is underway, including when it comes to the movement control system. So simply the IT system that logs people as they come in and out. So that's one example. I've mentioned personnel. We all know the personnel shortages. So where we can find local governments or provinces that are willing to assist us with personnel, we're also looking at that. So that's where the discussions are with the city of Cape Town that I mentioned, because we know that we want to grow tourism in South Africa, but there's no point in attracting more tourists and then they spend 5 hours standing in the airport queue. And that's what will happen if you don't fund the BMA. So what we're looking at now is to get law enforcement officials who are already vetted and trained to go through training, work with the BMA, and actually
Honourable Minister, your
supplement
time has
the work
expired.
that we're doing at the airport. Those are some concrete examples. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
The third supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Peterson. The Honourable Peterson, Patriotic Alliance.
Thank you, House Chair. Thank you, House Chair. Given the government's consideration of adjustments to the budget allocation towards Border Management Authority, can the Minister outline the specific areas or operational needs within the BNA that will benefit from this increased funding? Additionally, how will the government ensure that the budget adjustment results in tangible improvements in border control and management efficiency? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and to the Honourable Member. Well, I've spoken a lot about technology, so I think that that's one clear area in which we need to invest any additional resources. Some of the other ones are, of course, personnel. We need more border guards. South Africa has a severe shortage of border guards. Again, though, that's where cooperation with SAPS and the Defence Force is currently assisting. So when we recently had the issues at the Lebombo border post with Mozambique, it really was a good example of how cooperation with SAPS, public order policing, and the BMA can assist with personnel. But over the longer term, it's not sustainable. The BMA needs its own officials. That needs to grow from 2,700 to 11,000. So that's another clear example of where this funding will go. I think the second part of the question is really important. How does all of this translate into actual improvements on the ground? So firstly, of course, if we can get technology and we can detect people that are moving across the borderline, even though the BMA and Home Affairs is not responsible for building the actual border fence, we'll be able to detect people who are moving and we can catch them before they come into the country. And that's always financially better than having to catch them here and then deport. It's better to do that now. So that's a very clear, tangible impact. I think also, as I mentioned, trade facilitation. We don't want to have queues of trucks standing at the border posts for hours on end, because that's money lost. The money that's spent, wasted in those queues, is money that could be reinvested in South African companies to create more jobs. So if we can speed up the flow of borders, we've introduced the one-stop border post bill to Parliament. We want to go through that process. We're looking at public-private partnerships to redevelop some of the key land borders. And then I think if we can leverage technology, we can address both security and economy and the economic needs of the country in the border environment. And again, as I say, it's a good deal for South Africa. Thank you very much.
The last supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Thring.
Thank you. Honourable Minister, AP Letlape of Stellenbosch University writes that the main causes of our porous land borders are lack of resources, the length and material condition of the border, uncoordinated intelligence, corrupt government officials, the colonial border legacy, liberalist migration policies and laws, lack of integrated overarching national security strategy, the large South African informal employment sector, ineffective cooperation and collaboration between South African departments of state and national strategic level, and parallel departments in neighboring countries, which results in human trafficking, extremism, cross-border crime, drug trafficking, amongst others. Honourable Minister, how do you respond to Letlape's causes of our porous borders? And in responding, what intergovernmental initiatives are in place to protect our borders and citizens while strengthening the Border Management Authority? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Unfortunately, my time is too limited to go into the long list of issues identified by the researcher there. But I think the last part of the question really gets to the nub of it. So it really, at this stage, given where the BMA is, keep in mind it was officially launched by President Ramaphosa in October of last year. It's gone through a whole institutional set-up process. It's integrated officials from 7 agriculture, home affairs, forestry and fisheries, and it's actually had to bring them into a new organization. Now just think about all the different organizational cultures as one start, and then you can imagine the difficulty of getting that right. However, I would say that to a large extent the BMA has succeeded in that. It has set up as an institution the systems and processes that it requires. So what we need now is to build on that. That's why we've advertised for port commanders at all of the various ports in the country. So we will be filling those crucial positions where there will then be one person who's actually responsible for the management of a given port. This may sound elementary, Honourable Member, but can you imagine when there were 7 different agencies, who was actually in charge of a particular port? And immediately, once we fill those vacancies, we'll be able to have a command and control system in place at our ports. So these are some of the key human resource elements. But then on the collaboration front, just to emphasize again, it's already happening. The thing that was really lacking before is that central command and control element. So you had SAPS, the Revenue Service, the Defence Force, Health, etc., all present in the border environment, collaborating on a daily basis in real life. But there wasn't a streamlined command and control system. With the BMA there now, it's able to much more effectively pull those sort of different entities together, collaborate with them, and we are slowly starting to see, through the fact that the Lubombo border post issue did not drag on for days. It was because there was good coordination. So those are some of the initial promising signs. But I do believe to address that long list of underlying causes, we're going to have to adequately
Minister,
capacitate
your
the
time
BMA
has expired.
and invest in collaboration. Thank you.
Question number